Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Oath of Gold by Elizabeth Moon, the third book in the Deed of Paxenarian. This is a military fantasy book trilogy that blends military fantasy with also kind of, I would say, classic D&D style storytelling. The first book is almost entirely focused on the military fantasy stuff, and that is Sheep Farmer's Daughter. And I really enjoyed this book. It's not my cup of tea necessarily, but it was still really well done, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it like a 8 out of 10. Then I read book 2, which features more heavily the D&D style. The military elements are like there in snippets, but it's really a D&D style storytelling about Paxenarian becoming a paladin, and that's Divided Allegiance. And I didn't particularly love this book. I gave it like, what, was it, like a 6 out of 10 maybe? Maybe that was a little generous. I didn't really care for the book. But then I was like, you know what, I've already read 2 of the 3, I may as well finish it out. So I finished out the trilogy and read Oath of Gold. And this book is a good blend of the two. It is, I think it leans more into the D&D style paladin stuff, but it also has quite a bit of the military stuff. And I actually think the balance works better here than it did in book 2, which is why I liked it a little bit more. I also thought that the main story here, that's about the main middle chunk of the book, is very compelling. I think that the weak part of this book is the beginning and the end. The beginning just felt like more of the same from the last book. It felt like, haven't we gotten past this in Paxenarian's arc? Haven't we, been finished up the whole becoming a paladin and gaining her strength and gaining her her courage back? All that stuff, we seem like we spent the first 50 to 100 pages rehashing. Then, alternatively, the last 50 to 100 pages of the book is basically one big extended action sequence where things are coming to a head, and that sequence just didn't work for me. Action is very hard to work for me anyway, and it just didn't work for me in the book. And then you have the middle, which is about 300 pages, that I thought was excellent. The middle I thought was really strong in this book. The middle portion of this book basically is Pax is both going back to her company and reuniting with her old Duke Phelan, and at the same time, she also goes and is basically on a quest to find where her sword originated from, and therefore where the rightful king of that land is. And the two storylines intertwine quite nice. And this whole storyline of her trying to find who the king is and figure out who they're going to put as king of this land was just a fantastic, brilliant sequence. I really liked it. And there were moments that had me go, oh my goodness, and actually say, whoa, out loud. Like, there were some great moments in there. And I was like, oh, is Elizabeth Moon going to go there with the series? And it turns out she goes in a different direction. But it was still really cool how she did it. This book, I mentioned in my review of the last one, the fundamental problem with this trilogy is that Paxenarian is not a particularly interesting character herself. She is just kind of bland. She has no interest in romance. She has no interest in power. She has no interest in really anything other than service of Gerd in this book. And while that is commendable, it does not make for an interesting protagonist. And so she has goals to reach in the book that are really interesting, and she also has goals and like quests and stuff she has to go on because it's the right thing to do, and that's all good. But because she is just such a bland character, it just keeps the book from greatness and being a really hooking book, a book that really gets you into it and really excited about it. And that was even the problem. The reason book 1 is not a top tier book for me, it's a good book, it's a really good book, but it's not a top tier book, is because of the character. This is an example of world building's okay in this series, and plotting is pretty good in this series, and themes are really good in this series. Themes are strong, but because the character is just so weak, it makes it so difficult. And maybe this was a product of the times. Maybe people at the time didn't care because we have a strong female character in the book. We have her ability to be a soldier and equal to the men, and even better than the men in some cases. Maybe that was really unique at the time, and so it was okay to balance it out and to be like, all right, we don't need to have strong character development at the moment. Maybe that's what Elizabeth Moon was thinking, and maybe other people think this really works well for them. Let me know if this book, if the character development in this book and trilogy really worked for you. But for me, it just doesn't. So that is my basic review of Oath of Gold. It's not like I have a ton to say about the book. I really enjoyed it, but it's not a top tier book. Like, I would give it a 7 out of 10. So better than the second book, not quite as the good book. It's an enjoyable book. It ties up some threads from the series. So I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I finished the trilogy. This is one of those trilogies where I appreciate finishing it because I understand what it did for the fantasy genre, and I understand how authors could be influenced by this, but it's not necessarily gonna go down as one of my favorite series. So if you've read Oath of Gold, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.